Thank you all for coming and welcome everybody who is here already to Women's City Club program called Neighbors at Risk, Changes in Immigration Policies and How We Can Help. And if we had a subtitle, it would be What in the Heck Happened Today? Because that's how fluid the situation is. We came up with that nice big formal title, and now we just like every day it's like, whatever. So we are really hoping tonight to take a comprehensive look at how the recent daily changes in federal immigration regulations and practices are having a real effect on real people, the immigrants and refugees who live in greater Cincinnati, and the ones who were supposed to get here and are now stranded in various countries around the world. I am Janet Buning. I am a member of Women's City Club, a former president, a member of our programs committee, and I will be the moderator for the program tonight. And we do want to thank you all for joining us, and we hope that this program gives you some real important and significant and timely information about the impact that these changes are having on our own greater Cincinnati community, and also the contributions that immigrants and refugees in our community do make to us, and how we can support them and help in this interesting time. So before we begin, I'd like to ask our president, Beth Sollebarger, who wants to say a few words of welcome.
Oh, thank you, Janet. I'm Beth Sollebarger. I'm president of Women's City Club, and I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. Women's City Club is 110 years old this year, and we are still going strong. We present informative forums on civic issues like this every month. These forums are free, but like public radio, we depend on folks to support our work by becoming a member. You can do that by going to womencityclub.org and clicking on donate. And if you join today or tomorrow, you can come to a new member reception next Wednesday night from 6 to 8 in the Hermitage Room at the Regency. And we'll be glad to see you then. Thanks for your concern about the immigration issue, and thanks to our program committee for organizing tonight's program. And now I will turn it back over to Janet.
Well, I also want to recognize and thank Jeff, the voice you hear. He is our tech guru, also a former president of Women's City Club, because even though we're called Women's City Club, we want you to know that we welcome men and women as members of our organization. So we hope you all decide to join. Also tonight, we want to thank Ann Buning, who is the vice president of programs this year, and the other program committee members who work to make this event and all the others possible. Marge Davis, Laurie Frank, who I saw on screen a minute ago, Sarah Gideons, who's probably here somewhere, Susan Noonan, Sherry Rico, and David Siders. So our program tonight is going to be a panel discussion with three speakers. You see them in, well, I don't know where they are on your screen, but on mine, they're in the top line. Tony Stieritz, Megan Powley, and Brian Wright. And it'll also have a time for question and answer at the end of the program. The program is scheduled to run until 8:30, and we want to make sure everybody knows the program is being recorded. So please be aware of that the program is being recorded. During the speakers' presentations, we ask that everybody stay muted, please, to avoid background noise. We also encourage you to be visible on screen to let us see your happy, smiling face. We had a conversation while we were getting ready for you all to sign in about how it's nice to talk to name people, not boxes and names. So if you are open to that, please make yourself visible. Please use the chat feature to post questions and answers. As our speakers are doing their presentations, they're going to each do about a 15 to 20-minute presentation about their area of expertise. If you have a question you want to ask, please feel free to put it in the chat at any time, and we will get to those in the question and answer session. So let's get started. Let's get started. We are very honored to have three really amazing, wonderful, remarkable people with us tonight who are each working directly with the people in our community. And each of them has his or her own area of expertise, plus a wealth of information and experiences to share with you, and a lot of good stories too. So we have Tony Stieritz, who is the CEO of Catholic Charities of Southwestern Ohio. And that agency works with our U.S. State Department on refugee resettlement in this area. And they also offer a very broad array of support services to people who already live in the community. We have Brian Wright, the executive director at Cincinnati Compass. He works with the city of Cincinnati, the Chamber of Commerce, and more than 65 other community partners. And their mission is to advance the economic and social inclusion of immigrants and refugees in greater Cincinnati. If they sound familiar, it's because Tony and Brian spoke at a program we did just a year ago called Neighbors, Not News, where we talked about ways to welcome the people in our community. Now we're calling it Neighbors at Risk because that's what they are. And our third speaker tonight, who's going to be our first person to present, is Megan Powley, who is new to Women's City Club. She is an attorney with Jorge Martinez, attorney at laws. Her practice focuses on family-based and humanitarian-based immigration matters. And we're hoping that she will help us understand the many daily changes that are being made in immigration policies and the legal implications of all these executive orders on people who are seeking asylum, on the newcomers already living among us, on the DACA children who face a very uncertain future, and more. So we want to welcome Megan, and we deeply appreciate that all three of our speakers at a very critical time in their professional lives have taken the time to be with us this evening. So Megan, if you're ready to go, just the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Janet, and thank you to the Women's City Club for arranging this entire panel. Anytime that we can talk and raise, awareness about immigration issues, I want to do that. And thank you for having me. Because as you say, they're not, people that you don't know. This isn't something that's just happening to someone else who you've never met. You probably have met someone who's being impacted by this, whether it's directly impacted by these new policies, these new laws, or if it's one of their family members. You just don't know who actually isn't being impacted by this every single day. As Janet said, I primarily focus on humanitarian and family-based immigration. I earned my JD at University of Cincinnati in 2019, became a lawyer, and then I started focusing on employment-based immigration and family-based immigration, so a little bit different than what I currently do. About 2 years ago, I did move over from the employment-based to more humanitarian-based at Jorge Martinez. And there have been a lot of changes even since I started doing this just a couple of years ago. Frankly, a lot of those changes have happened in the last couple of months. But the first thing I really want to address is where we started even before January 20th of this year. And frankly, things weren't great then. The U.S. immigration system hasn't been good for a long time, even before the first Trump administration. The system has been broken and in desperate need of reform. I work with families every single day, and should it really take an attorney to bring a husband and wife together in the United States to live as a family? Personally, I don't think so. I don't think an attorney should be needed, but in a lot of cases, we are needed. Should it really take 10 years, even more than 10 years, for someone to gain legal status in the US or to get that, legal permanent residency in the US? Personally, I don't think so. I think it leaves a lot of people in limbo. So there's a lot of room for improvement and for changes in immigration law, but changes that would help people and changes that would encourage legal immigration. The changes that we're seeing right now, they're not doing that. What they're doing is they are creating a system of fear, a system of chaos, and a system that is not going to help people or even achieve the aims that the president would like to achieve. Now, I started under Trump 1.0, and back then it was chaos. Frankly, the Biden administration wasn't great on immigration, but at least we had a lot of consistency. At least we knew what we were doing. Biden failed immigrant families. The changes that he did make or the attempts that he made were too little too late. For example, in late 2024, he did a program called Keeping Families Together that would have created a pathway for a lot of people to be able to live with their families in security and in safety in the United States. Unfortunately, it was really limited in scope, and even worse, it was ultimately blocked by the courts. Now, that said, at least Biden did do some work for humanitarian relief. He expanded parole programs. Now, what this is it creates a legal entry into the United States so that people can pursue a legal pathway. This helped a lot of people fleeing for safety or even just coming to join family members. Unfortunately, we've already seen those programs being ended and being repealed. Another thing that Biden did is he expanded temporary protected status. This is a fantastic program that helps people who are in the United States when there is a crisis in their home country, and it's either not safe for that person to return home, or it will create an additional burden that their home country can't handle at that moment. So, these are really great programs that Biden did use, but again, it wasn't enough. Now, the one good thing about Biden's administration, the one thing I am really grateful for, is there was a lot of consistency. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but the immigration process is incredibly stressful. And if it goes badly, then, you're facing really dire consequences in a lot of scenarios. You're facing leaving your family, you're facing, leaving your livelihood, or leaving the only life you've known, the only home that you've known. So the reason consistency is so important is it gives people an idea of what's going to happen. It gives people some peace. So even though the process is difficult, consistency really matters. Now, we have already lost that consistency. It's only been a little over a month at this point, and it is frankly chaotic. First day in office, President Trump signed several executive orders that impacted immigration. These were a lot of things that we were expecting, but still not good to see in practice. I have a cheat sheet here. Two of them were clarifying the military's role in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States and securing our borders. The purpose of these two executive orders was to physically stop immigration. So expanded use of military on the border, expanded use of physical barriers on the border. This is not going to stop immigration. They've tried before and it didn't work. People will continue to risk their lives because the circumstances that they're leaving make the risk of dying worth it. I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget in the circumstances is that when you can't feed your child, when you live in fear every single day, it makes that journey worth it. And these are not going to stop people from making those journeys. Another big change is realigning the U.S. refugee admission program. The purpose of this is to stop legal immigration for refugees. Now, a refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their homeland because of really terrible circumstances, and they've already been designated outside of the United States as seeing someone who cannot go home, as someone who cannot go back to their country because they may die. And so at that point, there are organizations that designate them as refugees and then help them resettle in a safe third country. Trump has really limited that. The only exception has been for South Africans. And then a couple of other ones, protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. This is the one that caught everyone's attention. This is the executive order trying to end birthright citizenship. And frankly, it's the one that I'm not concerned about. And I know that probably sounds crazy, but to me, as someone doing this work, as someone who has read the Constitution, unlike some other people in the government, this is part of the 14th Amendment. There have been several lawsuits, several Supreme Court lawsuits and decisions that have upheld birthright citizenship. This is one of the few things that I'm not worried about, and I frankly think it's just a distraction. Finally, the last one I really want to bring up is designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. The reason that this one is so important is it's going to kill a lot of asylum cases. Now, I want to point out the legal difference between a refugee and an asylee. So like I said, a refugee is someone who's already been designated as someone who cannot return to their home country and is being given protection in a third country. An asylee is someone who leaves their country on their own and then asks for protection to a country. That is what a lot of people are doing at the southern border. A lot of people are fleeing their home country and saying, I am not safe. I cannot return home. I am scared for my life to return home. No, this is not everyone, but this is a lot of people who are coming to the southern border. The reason that this executive order is so important is a lot of people are fleeing cartel violence. There are rules in the asylum system. One of those rules is that if you have donated money, if you have given aid to a foreign terrorist organization, you cannot receive asylum in this country. A lot of people have been extorted by cartels. And those people who, are honest with the court and say, hey, I was extorted. I paid a bribe to the cartel because I was afraid for my life. I was afraid for the life of my child. They will now be barred from receiving asylum in this country. Now, obviously, that's just day one. There have been a lot of other changes since. There are a few that I want to bring up, such as the ending of what was called the CBP1 app. So, most people are aware there are a lot of people seeking aid at the southern border. This app was meant to relieve that backlog of people. It was meant to help people come into the country with a legal entry so that they could apply for some kind of relief. Ending that app is only going to create a further backlog. A lot of other executive orders are creating a further backlog, such as the firing of immigration judges, and not just immigration court judges, but also judges at what's called the Board of Immigration Appeals. There is a backlog of over 3 million cases in the immigration courts today. Firing those judges is only going to create a worse backlog. It's only going to create more uncertainty in people's lives. Another couple notable changes has been the ending of temporary protected status for Venezuelans. This means that as of April 2nd, a lot of Venezuelans will be removable from this country. They will be deportable. Previously, it was recognized that there's a dictatorship in Venezuela, the situation is not good, and people cannot safely return to that country. Because of those circumstances that are still in place to this day, people will now be forced to return to those circumstances because of the ending of temporary protected status. These are people who had the right to be here temporarily in hopes that the situation would change. Because it has not changed, they're just going to be going back to the exact circumstances that they fled from. Another really important thing is the signing of the Lake and Riley Act. The Lake and Riley Act, it's based on a terrible tragedy, but it is unconstitutional. This law is going to require the immigration detention of people who are undocumented, or people without legal status, or people with really limited legal status, if they're even accused of committing something as low level as a theft offense. They are not being convicted in a court of law of these crimes. They are just being accused. It is now mandatory for ICE to detain them. Even ICE, though, has said that they don't have the resources to enact this law. So we'll see what happened. We'll see what happens next with that. So, what do all of these changes mean? Because again, it's changing constantly. And frankly, the biggest change is general chaos and fear. I haven't gone a single day since the election without getting some kind of email or phone call, or even just a client stopping by the office telling me how scared they are. Even people in the process of applying for US citizenship are afraid because there's so much hostility towards them. Some things have already been rescinded, such as the Department of Justice's order saying that we could not use federal funding for any support for immigration courts. That's already been rescinded, but that doesn't mean that the fear and confusion isn't still there. We're also seeing, refugees being turned away. really unexpectedly. That's creating just a ton of problems. We're also seeing a ton of incompetence because, frankly, even in the government, nobody knows what's happening. We're also seeing people who are severely untrained doing these jobs. We've had ICE officers arrest and detain people for no reason. They then get released. We actually have someone who was arrested by ICE without a reason. They're in a process to, legalize their status. ICE released them within a couple of hours and then arrested them a second time before releasing them in a couple of hours. We still don't know why. We're still working on that, but we're dealing with a black box essentially, trying to get information out of the government. So, again, there's a lot of things that have changed, but there are still things that we can do. Immigration attorneys, we're still fighting, and I want you to know are opportunities to help for people who aren't attorneys. A lot of people, you probably have some skills that would be really, really helpful in the current environment. There are a lot of volunteer opportunities. For example, if you know another language, you could volunteer as a translator. Personally, I started in immigration when I was an undergrad, volunteering with an English as a second language class. I would go every Saturday, and I was the safe English speaker who would practice with you. Because as someone learning another language as an adult, it is scary. It is scary and nerve-wracking to start trying to actually use those language skills. So that was my job when I was in college, is I was the safe person to practice with. Some other really good ways to get involved are just reaching out to your congressional representatives. If you are upset about what's happening, let them know. And it's not just federal, it's also local. Butler County, the sheriff there is having a good time with this new administration, let's say. And it's not just the sheriff. Personally, a lot of my cases are for what we call special immigrant juveniles. These are children who were abused, abandoned, or neglected in their home country by one or both of their parents. This program, if the child makes it to the United States, it creates a legal pathway for that child to be here safely if an adult is willing to take custody of them here. Um, I do these cases all the time, and they are what have my heart. And it's really upsetting because recently Butler County, the juvenile court system there, they've made changes, and we can no longer do a lot of those cases. The reason is, I see two main fact patterns for those cases. One is when a child runs away from their parents because of mistreatment, abuse, because their parent can't feed them. They can't go to school, and they're running to an older sibling. They're running to an aunt or uncle in the United States, and that person takes custody of them, and they have a legal pathway here. Butler County is still okay with those cases, but they're not okay with the other common fact pattern that I have, and that is that a parent runs away from the other parent. A parent is bringing their child away from an abusive situation. They can't get help in their home country. I cannot tell you the number of women who I meet who have gone to the police for help in their home country and have been told, you need to be a better wife. You need to be a better partner. You need to do what your husband tells you. They flee to the United States for help. Butler County will no longer accept those cases because they don't think that program, the SHS program, is appropriate if it's a parent seeking custody of the child. Personally, I want to help any child that I can. I think that every child, regardless of where they were born, deserves a chance. So if you disagree with the way things are going, and you live in Butler County, you can contact your representatives there. You can, work to elect judges who are willing to work with this program. And finally, my biggest thing that I want to tell everybody is stay focused. I barely address the citizenship, the birthright citizenship, because again, I'm not really that concerned about it. I didn't even bring up Trump's $5 million gold card idea, because once again, that's not something that I'm concerned about, but it's something that's gained a lot of media attention. The reason I'm not concerned about it is because the program he's thinking about replacing, that's statutory. That's up to Congress to change. At this point in time, I don't think it's likely, so I'm not concerned. So my biggest takeaway is stay focused on the things that actually matter. These changes, these little changes that are actually making the biggest difference. Try to stay focused on that. All right, thank you so much. I think I'm over my time. Sorry about that.
Not a problem. I said we time codes are a suggestion, not a hard and fast. If you're giving us, this is really good information, and I hope that I hope I can share your optimism about the birthright citizenship and the gold cards, but I'm concerned about the courts, but that's for discussion later. But thank you for this good information, and thank you for giving us some hope in what seems to be a reasonably hopeless situation right now. And I see lots of questions coming in the chat. Please, as you think of them, people, put them in there. We are going to get to those in the Q&A. They will not be overlooked, so keep putting your questions into the chat. And thank you, Megan, for that very concise and very informative summary. Now we'll turn to Tony Stieritz, who is the CEO of Catholic Charities. His agency works with the United States State Department on refugee resettlement, bringing people who are approved here. And they also provide a very wide array of direct services ranging from immigration attorneys, housing, mental health services, Su Casa, Hispanic Center, and many more things that Tony will probably tell you about. So, Tony, we want you to tell us all about what Catholic Charities does, the people you're serving, how everybody's being affected by the recent changes with the new administration, the challenges that you're facing because of the federal orders, and anything else that you want us to know.
Thank you, Janet. I want to thank you. I want to thank Beth, Jeff, and everybody at Women's City Clubs for your ongoing interest in this issue and concern, support, and solidarity for our migrant brothers and sisters throughout the community. It's a privilege to be with you, Megan and Brian. Good to see you. So a little bit about Catholic Charities first. We served nearly 22,000 people last year through our variety of services. These include food pantries, mental health counseling, family programs, senior services, and certainly a collection of migration-related services. We serve nearly about 9,000 migrants through our various programs. This is a population that Catholic Charities has been serving since our beginnings in 1916. I think we're only 1 year younger than you guys at the Women's City Club. So it's very close and dear to our heart because these have always been a poor and vulnerable population in many respects in our community. And it's been kind of the niche where Catholic Charities has felt a calling to respond to. We serve everybody who comes through our doors. We don't bring any migrants to our community, but once they're here, we serve everybody, and that includes our migrant brothers and sisters. We do this, of course, out of a faith-based mission. We're compelled by the gospel to serve the least among us and to welcome the stranger. But we serve everybody from all backgrounds and faiths, and we work with a great deal of staff and volunteers and community supporters of all backgrounds and faiths. So anybody who has an affinity with our mission and wants to be a part of this work, we are eager to work with you in the Catholic Charities family. I'll just start just like on a very basic level. I think whatever anybody's viewpoints are about immigration or the immigration system, what needs to be, I think, always understood as a basic principle that these are human beings, and we believe that they're created in the image of likeness of God, like any one of us, and it is always morally wrong to scapegoat any population for whatever reason, or to use sweeping generalizations that demonize their character or label them in such a negative light. It's just factually inaccurate to do so, for one, but is also attack to their human dignity, as it would be for any of us. So I think it's important that in these times and places that we feel a special calling when such a group is so maligned, that we feel a special calling to to stand in solidarity with them, and speak the truth about their God-given rights and dignity. So as Janet mentioned, we do a number of immigration-related services. So some of those include our Su Casa Hispanic Center, our refugee resettlement services. We work with unaccompanied children to help keep them, to provide case management services to keep them safe and out of human trafficking. We provide immigration legal services. We're one of the pro bono and low bono organizations in the community that provides that service. And we have an Accuracy Now language interpretation services that provides translation in almost 100 different languages, and ESOL classes, in addition to other education opportunities. And lastly, we're also our mental health counseling staff we have a number of bilingual mental health staff, and so we really try to be culturally competent with a lot of the migrant clients that we see day in and day out in that program. So I think as Megan just very aptly summarized, these are uncertain times. What we know today could be completely different tomorrow. And uncertainty seems to be the buzzword of the day, and it's certainly how we keep describing things day in and day out. And there's uncertainty around our federal funding streams at our agency, like so many others, and also about how immigration is going to be enforced and the future of certain immigration programs. What I will say up front, though, is what is certain, and that is, I think, the dedication, the passion, and the solidarity of our staff, of volunteers, of people like you, like all of us here, who just want to do something good and positive in the midst of all of this. I have just seen an outpouring of concern and of support. And I think those are the kinds of moments where organizations like ours, like Women's City Club and many others, like Compass, are great immigration legal attorneys where we want to shine and be a hope in the darkness, a light in the darkness. So thank you for being a part of that. One area where I'll start kind of giving you the view from the ground as we see it at Catholic Charities is with our refugee resettlement program. I think that's been one of the most explicitly targeted, unfortunately, components of the immigration system. And thank you, Megan, for helping explain the distinction of a refugee from other migrants. It's a relatively small subset of the migrant population who get, in essence, acquire the designation as a formal refugee. I saw a question earlier on about kind of who designates when a country is bad enough to be designated for refugee status, or how do you earn that title? And that's defined by the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. So it's an international body that makes that first designation, in essence, of who qualifies as a refugee. And that's always going to be based off of a very specific set of circumstances related to either political, religious, racial persecution, or member of a targeted group. And so once that designation is set, usually a migrant fleeing a hopeless circumstance like that in fear of their life is in a refugee camp in a third country by the time they have that designation. So then countries around the world then identify how many refugees they're willing to take in a given year, and that number can fluctuate. In the first Trump administration, it was as low as 10 to 15,000 in a year for the entire country. During the Biden administration, it was around 100,000. But either way, what has been historically the case is, since it was started formally as a program of the U.S. State Department in 1980, it was not controversial. It was bipartisan. And it was a fully embraced way for our nation to provide a humanitarian pathway for those who have experienced some of the most horrendous situations in life that nobody would ever want to experience. that this country said it would be its duty to help resettle and provide a new start for people who've experienced such horrors. Uh, so it is, I think, concerning that now the refugee resettlement program is being politicized, that suddenly it's being targeted um, as if it's something that doesn't serve our nation's interest or that should be looked upon with some uh, level of, of concern. It's always been a well vetted and solid program for decades in this country. Um, so we, as an agency, resettled 311 refugees last year. They came from all over the world, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, Eritrea, Afghanistan, Venezuela, and Ukraine were some of the larger countries where we've seen our refugee families come from. Um, so during the first Trump administration, we saw the refugee program dwindle down and kind of come to a trickle. So we anticipated that something like this might happen again. I think what was not anticipated was how quickly and honestly, kind of how viciously this has all happened now. It happened really quite suddenly through a series of executive actions. And um, the first action was to just put a pause on resettlement. So immediately, the 90-day pause as the whole program was being looked at by the administration. What that did was, for us, it canceled the in-process resettlements of 10 families that all had flights scheduled. They all had their vetting completely done. They had their vaccinations. They had everything ready to come to the United States, some literally in an airport, and suddenly their flights were overnight just canceled, told that you're no longer going to the United States. Uh, we had a man who served in the U.S. military in Afghanistan. His flight was canceled. We had several families who were reuniting with loved ones that we had just resettled last year, who are right now going to have that chance to do that. We had one young man who was conscripted forcefully into the military at the age of 13. He became a refugee because he fled that situation, and he was due to arrive in the United States, and his flight was canceled. We had one Afghan family who was en route to the U.S., um, whose first stop was in Pakistan, and then their flight was canceled while they were in Pakistan, and that's where they're stuck now. I don't know what ultimately they're where they're going to be able to go after that. So it just created a lot of just unnecessary chaos and disruption to people's lives that just leaves us asking why did that have to happen that way? Um, so then, what I think many of you have probably heard, a number of federal programs, there's been federal funding freezes. And what has been really, I think, a surprise to us as so many other local governments and organizations around the country is these are current contracts, like um, current agreements that we have. It's not about the future of refugee resettlement. It's about the current work that we have yet to be paid for, in essence, for the resettlement process. So we just got word today that the U.S. State Department has just unilaterally canceled all the agreements with all the resettlement agencies in the country. So how it works for us is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is the national level resettlement agency that has an agreement with the U.S. State Department. And the U.S. Bishops Conference subcontracts with Catholic Charities, like organizations all across the country, including us. So that contract has suddenly just been canceled, and accompanied with a stop work order. What is distressing about that is that a stop work order is essentially saying whatever refugees you are in the process of providing a home for and immediate relief for, don't do that anymore. We're not going to pay you for that anymore. It's in the resettlement process. It's a 90-day process where we meet them at the airport. We give them a home through a lot of volunteer work and support. And the direct financial assistance that the refugee resettlement program provides, that the State Department provides, we get them basically started and getting a job so that they're earning their own money and becoming self-sufficient. So, in essence, I mean, I feel like what the government has said is we would rather these people be homeless in your community rather than us fulfill the obligation of the contract that we already agreed with you to. Uh, it's really leaves us again wondering, why was this necessary to handle it this way? Now, let me assure everybody that we will not abandon the families that we are working with. We have the wherewithal. We're a strong organization. We know we will support these families. That is not in question. It just leaves us distressed that, in essence, we very will likely be using private dollars and additional community fundraising support to make this happen, rather than what we expected from government support. One example, I mean, so one family is a woman she works at Walmart, and she's a refugee woman who's in her first 90 days of resettlement. She's cared for her brother with cerebral palsy. Um, so she's going to lose this direct assistance income, but we're going to step in and make sure that this family isn't evicted, in essence. We have a single mom who's caring for a 9-year-old who's in a very similar situation, who could be evicted without our additional support now. So this is just kind of the chaos, as Megan shared, that we're dealing with on the ground. But again, I think our staff, our volunteers, our supporters we're going to ensure that nobody goes without. The last piece I just kind of want to hit on then is just kind of the impact of law enforcement around all migrants that we work with. And I'll echo what Megan shared. I mean, the fear that families have right now. Sadly, we hear that day in and day out. We've had to pivot in some of our services, like our ESOL classes, for instance. We had all these registrations signed up, and families literally just canceled all their registrations. I'm not showing up to that. So we've gone online. So we've transitioned to virtual. It's almost like pandemic lockdown again, trying to offer services for people who are frightened to go out. So we're finding ways that we still serve people in need through this time of fear. I want to acknowledge that we also do services in Springfield, Ohio, where the Haitian population is. And, Megan mentioned the rescission of the TPS status for Venezuelans. So now the Haitian population will lose their TPS status as of August. So that's another alarming development where we just don't know what's going to happen to those folks. And so we want to support them any way we can. So we are also working with legal aid and the Immigration and Refugee Law Center on a number of Know Your Rights presentations in the community. We think those are very important right now, both for immigrant families to understand their rights, their constitutional rights that have not changed, and also to be prepared with power of attorney processes, that if a parent is deported, what will happen to the children? Who will take care of them? To make sure that they are making those kinds of plans. We need to assist them with that at this time. We are also offering a lot more ID drives. We call them Mark IDs. They're basically a third-party issued identification card that doesn't provide new rights or driving license to anybody, but it provides a helpful a tool to help people who don't have regular access to a government ID, a way to identify themselves, especially to a police officer if they need to. It's well recognized by the city of Cincinnati, Hamilton County, and a number of other jurisdictions. So the demand for those have really gone up, and we're meeting those demands right now. There's also been a rescission of the longstanding expectation that ICE enforcement would not enter into schools and churches and social service agencies and hospitals. So we don't know how that's going to be enforced, and that sends certainly a chilling effect. We are committed to the fact that we want to continue to offer a welcoming space for people to receive the sacraments, to pursue their education, and to receive emergency assistance, to receive the works of mercy. As a faith community, we won't change our commitment to that. And I want to just say here, I would say the vast majority of local law enforcement that we've interacted with, I think they want to be helpful. They don't want to be deputized as immigration officers. They want immigrants to come forward, to report crimes, to feel safe. And they know that they're part of the fabric of this community. And so we're appreciative to those enforcement agencies that want to be, I think, good neighbors in this work. So I'll be happy to address questions later. I want to give Brian his due time, and I know we'll get into questions. And again, I just want to thank everybody here for your concern, your interest, your willingness to want to get involved. We have a number of volunteer opportunities, a call for financial support in this time, and a way to pray and just be in concern for our immigrant families. Happy to talk to anybody individually about that. And I will echo Megan's call for public advocacy. I think, we need our congressional leaders to step up. What I have the blessing, I think, of walking around a lot of different ideological circles. We have such a broad bandwidth of supporters from liberal to conservative. What I could generally say, I think, as people understand what's happening, even if people wanted stricter immigration laws or a different approach to immigration than the last administration, this is not what was imagined. This is not what people are generally wanting, has been my experience in talking to people. There's just a lot here that I think we need strong, reasonable voices in positions of power helping to try to put us on a better track. So thanks.
Tony,
look forward to talking with you further.
You have done an amazing job of putting a very human face on the problems. And I think that is, if we can get our representatives and the people in power to see these people as individuals, that would be a huge step in the right direction. The news is grim, but I'm grateful that there still is an agency out there that's going to find a way to support people. And don't worry, Brian, you're going to have all your time too. I had a little wiggle time built in, so we're fine. So we're okay. But that is, I'm very moved by what you said, Tony. Thank you for sharing all those stories. And now we will go to Brian, who is last but definitely not least. It kind of flows in an order of how we think about things, I thought. So Brian is the executive director of Cincinnati Compass, a collaborative project of the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, the City of Cincinnati, and more than 65 community partners. And they work together to advance the economic and social inclusion of immigrants and refugees, which in turn enhances the economic development of the greater Cincinnati region. Brian has wonderful PowerPoints and facts and statistics on the really positive impact that all these newcomers do bring to our community. So we're going to let him talk about what Cincinnati Compass is doing, how they're helping to reduce the barriers to get people into good working situations, and in general, what is the business community, how are they stepping up to try to help in this kind of chaotic, confusing time that we're all experiencing. So Brian, thank you for being here, and take your time. We're ready to hear you.
No, Janet, thank you for having me. I was really excited when you reached out to come back again. So I'm happy to be here and happy to do it again. And anytime you ask me to do something, I'll always say yes. So happy to be here. And with the last name right, in alphabetical order. I'm used to going last, and also I'm very slow, so I'm always the last person. So my wife hates that I'm very slow, but it's
Well,
just
the
how it
last shall be first, Brian. We know that. Okay.
This is true. And also going after Megan and Tony, I feel like I should just say ditto and then we move into questions. So they did such a good job of covering the topic. But I'll talk a little bit about Compass, what we do. Um, we, and then just some data, and then talk about some of the action steps. And I really liked what Megan and Tony talked about engaging and ways we can take action. I mean, at the federal level, yes, we want to work with our congressional leaders, but we know that immigration law has not really been changed in the last 3 decades, right? So I mean, just think about what's happened in the last 3 decades: the AI, machine learning, the advent of the Internet of Things, and so on. So um, but I'll talk about some of the more kind of state and local things that we can do. And there are some state bills that it would be great to have some responses to immediately. Um, but with Compass, so unlike law firms and Catholic Charities, we are not a service provider. We are a trusted connector and convener. We do intervene where gaps do exist, but we again play the role of a trust connector to refer people to the experts that do the work. And so where we do, the kind of areas that we work in, I'll talk about the areas and then the levels we work at, right? So at first we work in workforce development, small business development, and civic engagement, and also narrative and storytelling. And really to build the social, civic, and economic power of immigrants and refugees in the Cincinnati region. So Southwest Ohio, Northern Kentucky, Southeast Indiana. The levels we work at is at the community level. So connecting community members, newcomers to resources, whether it's immigration services, social services, to other communities, whether it's around faith or social interests, what have you, so that people feel a sense of connection and belonging to the region. We work with providers to make sure that their services are visible and accessible to community members. There's a lot of great resources, but sometimes they're not culturally or linguistically relevant or appropriate for organizations, for community members. So we reduce those barriers. And one example in workforce is working with, say, Ohio Means Jobs. So now they provide Spanish and French interpreters at their job fairs. So that when job seekers with limited English proficiency come in, they're able to engage, or actually in the reverse, the employers are able to engage with that talent coming in. So that's some of the areas we work with providers. Also with funders, there's obviously, as Tony and Megan have talked about, with some cancellations of and freezing of federal funding, working with local municipalities, city and county governments, as well as foundations, and to be aware of the problems, because and Jen, I think you touched on this earlier around people just really are unaware of who's coming here. So immigrant refugee communities are coming here, how they're coming here through the immigration system, and have a lot of strong opinions, but are really uninformed or disinformed intentionally by what is really happening. So, and that's why we try to level it with facts and data to help level the conversation to a more honest conversation, so we can center the humanity and dignity of people coming to the U.S., right? So again, we work with the community level, we work with providers, we work with employers around inclusive recruitment, hiring, onboarding, retention practices, and then we do policy work. And as I shared, there's not a lot at the federal level. We do actively work at the federal level, but a lot of the main work is happening at the state and local. So one of the areas around workforce is in the state level, we know that people are retiring across different industries, and so we need to refill those jobs. One of those key areas is in healthcare. So we know that physicians in the state of Ohio, 22% are foreign born. And so, but yeah, we still retire. So we're working at the level of helping to reduce barriers for internationally trained professionals to return to their fields. And one of those happens to be healthcare. And so are drafting now what's called an IMG bill, an International Medical Graduate Bill, so that doctors and physicians can get licensed in the state of Ohio in a more streamlined process. And by doing so, it not only frees up spaces in the residency pipeline for U.S. trained individuals, it also provides a pathway for international trade professionals to, in a more expedient way, to get into the workforce to help address some of the healthcare needs we have. Because we know that there's healthcare shortages in rural areas and other underserved populations as well. So that's kind of an idea of like how we work. But again, it's in workforce, small business development, and civic engagement. And so we do focus our work in inclusive economic development. We understand that job growth is outpacing population growth. So we have to find the talent from somewhere. And so we have, in the region, 48% of immigrants and refugees have a bachelor's degree or higher, but they're woefully underemployed. So they're working in low wage jobs. And so we work, and that's part of the reason we work with employers to kind of identify this talent, but also with, workforce and educational institutions to make sure that they're helping to train immigrant refugees who bring skills to the region, right? To make it a more inclusive, welcoming region as well. So I can share some data afterwards, or I can, Janet, would you like me to share the screen and show some data real quick?
Sure,
'Cause
go
I think
ahead and you can screen share anytime. Yeah,
yeah,
I was totally impressed by all the data you have because we have this image of these poor people coming and needing our help and they're not. So they help us. Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
All right, so I've got, let me do the slideshow. Why am I not seeing the, somebody help me out. Do I not have it open enough?
What are you
They're next
looking
to
for?
record.
View, slide.
Uh,
You want normal? You want sorter?
slideshow. Yeah, on the top of
Slideshow. There we
right
go.
there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
There
Thank
you
you.
go.
All
Okay.
right. So can everybody see this?
Yes.
So I've shared this already about our levels and the areas of work that we're in, why people are coming. Megan and Tony did a great job of explaining that. So we're going to update some of this data. And as we know, unfortunately, a lot of data is being taken down, a lot of this public data that we need to show. And so we often hear these stories around how immigrants, refugees are taking jobs, right? And are pulling from resources. But what we know to be true is that immigrants and refugees are job creators, right? Are more likely to be entrepreneurial um, and to start businesses, not only in Main Street businesses like restaurants, hair and nail salons that add vibrancy to our neighborhoods, but also in the tech startup space. So the tech startup space, when we think about unicorn businesses, those billion-dollar startup businesses, 55% of them are started by immigrants. Now, when we think about those startups and include the C-suite, 80% of those startups have an immigrant founder or someone in the C-suite. So immigrants are really driving the economy. We know this. And also, like, and are overrepresented in industries, and I'll talk about this as well later in food and manufacturing. But we also think about, economic contributions and household income of $4.1 billion in the region, with contributing $400 million in state and local taxes, leaving them with $2.9 billion to reinvest back into the local economies. We are a consumer, we are a capitalist economy, so we do have, consumerism drives our economy in a great way. And so that spending power is really important. And so, but also to keep in mind that oftentimes immigrants are paying into systems that they do not benefit from because of their status, right? So are paying into Social Security, paying into Medicaid, and do not have access to those benefits, right? So they're actually subsidizing the economy in a pretty substantial way. And I shared, and Megan and Tony talked a little bit about where folks are coming from, and so you'll see like the largest is India, Mexico, China, Guatemala, Philippines, Vietnam, and so on. And I can share these afterwards if anybody is interested to see this data. This is census data, but it's nicely put together by the Center for Research and Data at the regional chamber. Now, where people are living, and this should be no surprise to anyone here, but we know that immigrants and refugees are driving population growth in the region. And why does that matter? We need a stronger tax base. We need more folks to fill the jobs, and we need, diversity brings innovation, right? And we want to be a hub for global talent and innovation in the region. And so we see, and Cincinnati is kind of like the donut hole, right? People are moving into the surrounding areas, into Springdale, into Westchester and Mason, into Erlanger and Fort Mitchell and Hebron as well. So, and why is that? It's because it's where the jobs are, right? And so we're seeing where people are moving to these areas. And I'm happy to
Brian, can I
share.
also ask, is it because of housing costs too? Is
And
that
as
a
well,
factor?
housing costs, school
Okay,
districts, and then employment as well. So,
okay.
but no, that's a great question. And yeah, and to that point, just please interrupt me anytime you want to. So, this is census data and this is regional data that we're getting. I mean, this is obviously city or township specific, but um, happy to share this afterwards as well.
Yeah.
So as I shared this earlier, like why, for us, yes, it is morally and ethically the right thing to do to welcome, people coming to the US. We want to help, support our neighbors, but also in thinking about like growing our economy and having a thriving economy, um, we have immigrants have a higher rate of labor force participation. They're more likely to be prime working age, and so, and
Mhm.
also, as I shared, are highly skilled as well when they're coming as well.
Wow.
Industries that where people are working, manufacturing, and these are industries that also drive our region. When we think about manufacturing, whether it's food-based manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, educational services with our universities, the healthcare systems, whether it's St. Elizabeth, Mercy Health, which is the largest health network in the state of Ohio, Cincinnati Children's, the
Mm.
#1 children's hospital in the country, professional scientific management, finance and arts. And you'll notice like where in the region where immigrants and refugees make up around 6% of the population, we actually believe that number to be quite higher because, as you all know, immigrants are a hard to count population. They're not likely to fill out the census. And I'm worried that that's going to be increasingly so with this administration. Um, and so, really punching above their weight class as far as participation in the labor force, right? So, and when we think about
Wow.
different communities, right? And we've talked about specifically refugees, DACA recipients, asylum seekers, the undocumented community member. You can see here the economic impact that these communities are having in the states, in Ohio and
Wow.
Kentucky. Now, sorry about that. The Now you may wonder, well, how do we know about the undocumented community members? Well, many of the individuals may have an I-10 number that is collected with the IRS and or filing taxes. A lot of agencies are like for us at Compass, we advise us if you are working, you should not be working unlawfully, but we understand that you have to eat, right? You've got to feed your family. So you're going to be working. So now sometimes people may be unlawfully using a social security number, or maybe they are using one because most of undocumented community members are overstays, meaning that they came on a visa and then overstayed their visa. And so they may have obtained a social security number and then now are using that still, or have an I-10. But you'll see where contributing and, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars in state and local taxes, again, for services they can't
Mhm.
access, right?
Wow.
So we use the reason why I share this data. So as you know, in some of our work with our civic engagement work, one of the things that we do, we have a community council of about 25 country and ethnic community-based organizations to help them build their capacity because oftentimes they can't compete with the larger nonprofits for funding and such, right? They're also the front line and of arrival for when people come if they're not coming through a refugee resettlement agency or if they're not coming with an employer, but they're coming on a family base or something. So they're looking for additional support networks, right? So family and community networks. So we work with these organizations to build their capacity. So we train a lot of the individuals on how to do research, focus groups, listening sessions, participant observation. So they combine that data with the lived experience so they can advocate within their spheres of influence, whether it's around better housing for refugees. So housing is a huge conversation we're having nationally, right? But how does that look like? It looks a little bit different for immigrant refugee communities. So how does mental health and the provision of care, preventative care and others look? It looks a little bit different for immigrant communities and even within immigrant communities, right? And so we have in partnership with Interact for Health, have a fund for small organizations to have community responses to mental health. So we're working with the Kentucky African Women's Association, the Nepali Language and Arts Center, and Refuge Collaborative to help them with, again, community driven responses to mental health to be for preventative action. So, and also that funding helps them to build their capacity as a nonprofit organization. And so, oops.
Right.
And one thing about international students, because Megan talked
Students.
about, the kind of the spectrum where people, it's not, it's the the rhetoric that we heard during the campaign was to focus on criminals, right? But we know it's an onslaught. It's a attack on all immigrants, whether we're talking about non-immigrant visas, in people coming here as an international student, people coming here through the asylum process or getting parole, the Haitian, Cuban, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan program, the CBP1, everything. It's everything is being challenged. And so again, we see the economic impact. Ohio is always in the top 10 of receiving international students. Why is this important? Is because when we think about the CHIPS Act, when we think about advanced manufacturing, when we think about Intel that's in central Ohio and jobs that are being filled, then we have to find the talent from somewhere. When you think about universities where College of Engineering and Applied Sciences, IT programs, 60 to 70% of those students are international students, and we lose that
Mhm.
talent. So we're not
Mm.
doing this as a way to kind of suggesting this as a way to take jobs from US born workers. But what we're saying is it's a both and strategy. Let's reduce barriers for educational, pathways for all residents and then leverage the talent that's already here as well. It's a both and strategy so that we want shared prosperity for everyone. It doesn't matter the immigration status. It's a matter of like we as people, how do we share in this prosperity? And again, there's just some more data where people are coming from. $1.2 billion international student expenditure that's invested in the state of Ohio.
Oh,
I mean, we're talking real dollars, right? So
oh, yeah.
310 million in Kentucky as well. So I'm gonna stop sharing.
Brian, we have a question in chat that people are saying, are they able to get copies of your slides? Are these posted on your website that people could go to Cincinnati Compass and see them and get them?
Sure, we do have some data on our website, but I'm happy to share this. Happy to share
If
this
Women's
information.
City Club could post it along with this video is this program rather is being videoed, recorded, and will be posted, and we could post your slides too if you're open for that. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think your slides are amazing that we have this image that created by news people, media, political people of what immigrants look like, and your slides go, yeah, that's completely wrong. Everything you thought you knew is wrong, and this is reality, and that's those slides are amazing. And what you do, the work you do is very helpful.
Thank you. And just to share a couple of things, when we think about
Yeah.
wages, right? And we often hear not only about taking jobs, but also, taking from services. We know that, I mean, looking at the Bipartisan Policy Center and the Congressional Budget Office, knowing that we need there when we talked about, this word of the surge, right, between 2001 under the Biden administration. CBO put out a report of the net economic gain because of people coming during that period. And I can share that report as well. We know that when the CBO did a longitudinal study of refugees being resettled in the United States, yes, there was that short-term expenditure of not only the resettlement process, but of schools, Medicaid and such, but the long-term net gain was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we know that it just economically makes sense for all of us, and we all benefit in that shared prosperity, right? And so wages, and we did a presentation in Northern Kentucky, and there was a letter to the editor that came back and was really just not very nice, right? And it had some, I don't think it was an argument in good faith, right? And so talking about wages. Well, what we know with the data is that yes, in some instances in industries that low wage workers are impacted by immigrants coming in on taking low wage jobs. But we know that long term, that ends up leveling out and returning to normal wages. And actually, wages in most industries go up. So
Mm.
not only is there job creation through entrepreneurship, but with the design and innovation of positions, because when you have multilingual talent, you expand to new networks, whether it's for talent pipelines, more product markets for the business. And so it's just a net gain for businesses as well. This is why businesses in Springfield, when you talk about Haitian community members in Springfield, were like
Mhm.
very happy to have an available workforce. And so, but yeah, I'll stop there because I know I'm in between us and questions. So
Well, there's a lot of questions. Beth is asking if you have shared these statistics with our state and local elected officials if they are aware that they maybe could benefit from this education too. Have they seen this? Has there been any outreach to state and local elected people?
So we gave this. So Myra Jackson with the IRLC recently presented to the Health State Subcommittee with Vice Mayor Kearney and shared this data. I presented with another subcommittee led by Councilmember Owens. I've met regularly. Someone mentioned earlier in the chat about meeting with our local congressmen, and we've shared it with their offices, also with senators. So yes, we share this information and in our policy work as well. And if it's okay, Janet, the last question someone asked about the current situation for the 3,000 Senegalese who are in Lachlan.
Sure.
So we're not again, a service provider, but about 2 years ago, we received a call from someone in Cleveland saying, we're sending 3 people to the Islamic Center who needs housing and support. Can you help? So I reached out to Henry Hain, the executive director of the Islamic Center there. And then also the Clifton Mosque. So we formed a group, and so Catholic Charities is on this call. And so to help Free Store Food Bank, Community Action Agency, several leaders in the Mauritanian community, and as you know, Mauritania, Mali, and Senegal are all connected, and so they also transcend these colonial boundaries, and many are Fulani Pular, and so started to bring in resources to help support the communities that are there in Lachlan, right? So that was just kind of another way we've worked with them. Many of them have been able to get work authorization and work with groups there like Valley Interfaith, the Metanoia Center. Vincent Wilson with Queen City Bikes has worked to be able to build more than 400 bikes to help individuals have transportation to ESL classes, to job training, and so on. So there's been a lot of activity there in Lachlan, Forest Park area. The Forest Park Branch Library has been really supportive. But to your point, Janet, yes, we have been working with local elected officials around that community and more broader community. Yes, we do share that data as well. The one last thing I'm sorry is, and thinking about, that I want to bring some attention to, is there are some state bills in Ohio that are very anti-immigrant.
Yes.
And so one of them is the
Gross.
and I'll share the link in the chat so you can see the list of bills. Not all of them are you can do a search for immigration and a lot of them are coming up. But the one is an act protecting Ohio communities, which is basically deputizing local law enforcement to work with ICE and to make it punishable that if local municipalities do not collaborate with federal law enforcement, that states will pull funding. So as if we need more funding pulled from local entities. So and then there is another one that is requiring certain departments to keep and maintain immigration information. So it would be great to contact your local. And actually, some of these bills are only in committee, or some of them haven't even been. They've only been introduced. So, but we're trying to keep an eye on these in Ohio and Kentucky as well, and even some of the positive ones, like in Kentucky, they've done a really good job of passing some bills related to integrated English language learning and technical training, scholarships for refugee students. And so there's been some positive things in Kentucky, but there's also been some negative ones like these anti-DE&I bills like we've seen in Ohio, SB1 and such. So, but happy to, continue to work on that as well, but I'll stop there.
Well, and you mentioned the Mauritanians. One of the questions was about the thousands of asylum seekers who are backlogged and they need funding to process their credible asylum claims. You mentioned that a little bit about the people from Mauritania when you spoke about the Senegalese. The question is, what is suggested for them? They're unsure of their status and their paperwork, or that they're going to get asylum. What is suggested for them to do in the meantime while they're waiting to go before a judge? Do any of you have an answer to that question, Tony or Megan or Brian? What could they do? Can they be
Yeah, so the
helped?
process while you're waiting for your asylum claim to be heard it's very long, frankly. And currently you have to wait 180 days once you file your asylum claim before you are able to actually have a work permit. So the asylum process does allow for a work permit while you are waiting, but that's a 6-month wait. So, especially for Mauritanians, a lot of people are escaping modern day slavery from Mauritania. A lot of people are coming without any help, without funds. So then they get here, they apply for asylum, and they have to make it for 6 months before they are able to. I apologize, my cat is wanting to join the discussion. But they have to wait 6 months before they are able to actually start legally working. So, as it was already said, the reality is we know people have to eat, and we know that there is undocumented working, unauthorized work happening. In the meantime, though, if you are able to help support a family, if you're able to donate to organizations that do help provide that support, that makes a real difference for people in their lives. Come here.
Okay, that's helpful. And then a question I think that was asked in the very beginning about, does the State Department define a nation's crisis status? One of you, I think, was it Tony, said the UN does that, or maybe you said that the UN does that. So it's not the State Department. And then what entity or body can a person who has temporary protective status appeal to? And I'm not sure what that means. If they're
So,
trying to resolve their status or just to be safe.
So, unfortunately, if you are losing your temporary protected status, there's not an appeal for that. What you can do is
Oh,
look for another status. This is not going to apply to everyone. Unfortunately, that is the reality. But for a lot of people, asylum may be appropriate. Generally, you do have to apply for asylum within 1 year of entering the United States to actually be eligible for asylum. There are other forms of relief. For example, there's something called withholding of removal, which does not create a pathway to a green card, and by green card, I mean legal permanent residency. So that actually really helps stabilize someone's life. But it does allow you to stay in the United States pretty much indefinitely. However, you know, even if you are applying for asylum now, there is an argument to be made that there's been a change of circumstances and that's why asylum is now appropriate for you. And that would be the loss of TPS status. So, reach out to an immigration attorney if you are losing your TPS status or know someone who is. Again, Catholic Charities is phenomenal and does a lot of great work, pro bono and pro bono, which makes a huge difference because, the reality is not everyone can afford a private attorney. We do as many pro bono cases as we can take on.
so Catholic Church, Tony, that you're able to help these folks then?
As much as we have the capacity to. So we are
Right.
almost always at capacity, but always trying to meet the need that's coming to our door. Um, and we have to be discerning too. Like if asylum cases, as Megan has explained, are very long, very complicated, multi-year processes. So they're very
Right.
intensive. So it's important that we're going to take the cases that really have some credible or we think are really winnable that we can really get through. And so we have to be discerning in that. But yeah, I mean, we if anybody has a legal need, we would invite them to come go through our intake, and we will absolutely take a look at the case.
Seems like there's a lot of people on this call who may be getting in touch with you about those things. There's several questions about the immigrant students, the children who are afraid to go to school because of ICE. And Brian, you mentioned about the law enforcement being stepped up in those two bills that are being considered. The question is, how are immigrant families being encouraged to motivate their child to go to school without being in fear? Is there an answer to that question?
So
Anybody?
one of the things, and I just want Alice, thank you for catching that. Um, uh, there was Myra, RLC, and Catholic Charities and Legal Aid have done know your rights trainings at the different schools, and what they reported back was there was in some schools there was a drop in about 60% in attendance, and what they
Mhm.
noticed after these know your rights trainings that attendance went back up
Okay.
because of the trust that was built back with knowing that the schools were protecting them, and then also they had their information. They had information about their rights as well. And we've seen this also in other school districts like Princeton City School Districts, in which some of you may have seen in the news, where they have a pretty rigorous protocol for how to handle a situation if ICE shows up at the school, but also doing additional Know Your Rights trainings for individuals, for impacted communities, as well as faculty and staff supporting. So that has been a proven strategy in a quick sense. But I think there's still a need to the question, to continue with trust building by providing ongoing information and demonstrate through action that institutions are committed to supporting and protecting immigrant families. Not just it's in the schools, but also in after school programs. Many of the students are engaged in athletic and theatrical and other types of programming. And so making sure and understand there's certain safety jurisdictions that it gets beyond what the school can do on a school bus, at a school bus stop, city bus. My kids take the city bus to school there at CPS. But I think we need to continue to build in those safety and protection protocols across all aspects. And I think the communities are seeing that.
And Brian has put in, for those who are monitoring chat, and we'll share this on our website too. Brian has put into the chat box how you can send an email to Cincinnati KY representation gmail.com with Know Your Rights in the subject body, and then you can get a reply to get to a link that you can get this training. So you can offer this to people if you know of populations or groups of schools. I know that a lot of the CPS schools in Price Hill have seen a tremendous drop in attendance because there's so many immigrant children that go to those schools. So yeah, those are things you can do. So we will post and share that information. One of our people is asking for Tony, are there other nations who can take these families that have been stopped en route? Is there any possibility to redirect them to another nation that's safe?
That's a wonderful question. Unfortunately, I just don't know how to answer that because we don't have a relationship with the refugees till they get here.
Oh,
That's the state, that's the UN, and then the State Department that's handling all of that. We're the ones who meet them at the airport and then work to start their new life here. Now we would know about who's coming mainly through if they're reuniting with a loved one through that relationship already, or what we've been told so far from the State Department in essence. So that's how we would know. So we wouldn't be in a position to be able to directly work with that person other than if we were to able to work with family relationships and other relationships that we might have in other countries.
okay, that's a good answer. The only answer. Another question is, have any of the government agencies asked any of you for your files, your registrations? Have they subpoenaed you to get any information? So I guess the question is looking to see what uh, level of involvement government agent enforcement's reaching out to. Is that something we can talk about or?
As of yet, no.
Okay,
But I think I'll also just mention though that there are our rights and every organization's rights have not changed.
okay,
Even with the rescission of the direction to ICE to not go into sensitive locations, um, we all still have Fourth Amendment rights to expect appropriate warrants and subpoenas if that kind of information is being sought after. So we would still expect those to be followed and everybody to have the right to consult with legal counsel in such a circumstance.
Just to
okay,
add on to that, there is a huge difference under Fourth Amendment protection between public areas and private areas. So, I think everybody knows if your home, that's your sanctuary, you don't have to let the cops in unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. Now, when you're in a public space, different. If you are in a business entity or some kind of private organization, once again, the rules are a little bit different. So essentially, if someone was to come into an office space, a business space, and that is an area that the general public has access to, the government can also enter that area. Now,
Hmm.
that does not give the government the right to go anywhere else. So for example, at our law office, we have an open area in the front of our office for a reception room. Potentially, the government could enter that area. However, they have to stop there. They cannot come back to the private offices because those are private and the general public is not allowed back there. They would still need a warrant to get to that. Law office is a little bit different again because our records are protected under, client confidentiality rules. So it'd be really hard to get a warrant for a law office. That said, there are other rules that all businesses have to follow. The thing I would highlight are those I-9s. So this is work authorization forms.
Mhm.
I am advising everyone, if you are in charge of I-9s or you are part of an organization that has those I-9 forms, just take a couple minutes and make sure everything's up to date and everything's good and organized.
Okay. Okay, good information. Thank you. There was a question, I guess, maybe for Brian about is there a way to separate your data, in your data, to separate immigrant status from refugee status? And it looked like to me that you had done that in some of your slides.
Yeah, there's in some of the slides, yeah. So we were able to. It gets a little bit more challenging as you localize the data, but we are
Mm-hmm.
able to separate out at the state level between, as I show with refugees, DACA recipients, and undocumented community
Right.
members. But when it gets into more localized area, it gets a little bit harder to separate that out.
Okay.
Yeah, between uh, immigration status and economic impact.
Thank you. This question's more of an opinion question. Given the real and positive data on the economic and cultural impact that immigrants have on the United States, what are your thoughts on why the current administration, and in parentheses, Project 2025, painted a negative picture of the impact of the immigrant population?
Racism and xenophobia, period.
They're an
Any
easy
other
scapegoat.
responses? I'm
It's
sorry?
it's a really easy community to scapegoat, to create that fear of the other.
Yep.
Uniting against a common enemy that will get you a lot of places. And unfortunately, it got
Mhm.
people to the White House.
And
Yes.
just to be, I mean, historically, the immigration system was not built out of goodwill, and it was built to exclude and get out. I mean, you look at the Chinese Exclusion Act, you look at the Japanese internment camps. I mean, historically, the immigration system has not been built on like, yes, humanitarian relief has been built into it, but has not been one of, despite what the poem on the Statue of Liberty has not been built to welcome and support. So I think that again with Project 2025, I mean we have, the vice president was blaming rising housing costs on immigrant populations. There was a bill in the previous Ohio state legislature saying that high housing costs were due to immigrant population. We know that's not the reason. It's housing stock. That's the problem. And who builds the homes? So I think like, it doesn't economically make sense because, it is, like Megan said, it is scapegoating of a community to build a political party power.
Right. And here's a good action step. Rose is asking, who should we be calling and writing to ask them to oppose deputizing law enforcement? And I'm assuming that means at the local level. So, yeah, I mean, Charmaine McGuffey, our Hamilton County Sheriff, you can write to her. You mentioned the Butler County, the problems in Butler County. Megan, do you want to say anything else about that? Who would you write to if you were going to write to Butler County?
So I don't know how successful writing to the Butler County Sheriff would be. But you could write to the juvenile court there and let them know your feelings. And if you believe
Ah,
that, children should be helped regardless of country of origin, you can let that know. You can let them know that. I know from some discussions that weren't, public. But from what we can tell, it seems like there was some debate amongst the powers that be whether or not we should be using resources on immigrant children. Whether or not they're taking away resources from children who are born here. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't have access to that data. But it's hard for me to imagine that they're making that much of a dent to make that much of a difference that we, have to be selective about the children who are helped. So you can always, write to those elected officials. And also, next election cycle, if you want a different candidate, work on that, work on those campaigns.
And I know that when we did this program a year ago, we had our Congressman Greg Landsman speak, and he spoke very openly about the things that his office could do. We didn't invite him on the call this time because we had some new ground we wanted to cover, and he doesn't exactly have a lot of votes on his favor right now. So he still will help you. I know that he is very receptive to helping to the extent that his office can. But when it comes to getting laws passed right now, it's not really happening. Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
No, I want just thinking about ways to help out. And yes, I think writing, and I'm trying to find it in the like there is some web tools to help to, to just to do something, right? It's overwhelming. But if you can find what you're passionate about and focus on that thing, so that you don't get burned out. Yes, we're upset about USAID. Yes, we're upset about these things, but if we can focus on one thing, and there is something to write letters. So I think writing letters is very important to your local your representatives and let them hear from you at all levels. I think that's
Mhm.
important. Having these conversations is important. Talking to your neighbors and family members, those kitchen table conversations are still important, still matter. I think also being mindful of where you spend your dollars. With the rumors around raids, there was one at a rumor around a raid at El Valle Verde in Carthage. And so they lost business temporarily because people were afraid to go. And so Radio Cincinnati, it's a fairly new Spanish language radio station that's come up recently. Um, has been doing a good job of elevating small businesses. And I think that's another way of like, and on our website, we have kind of directory. So Asian Natty. So if you've ever been to Asian Food Fest, they have a directory of Asian API restaurants in the region. Cincy Sabroso was the Hispanic Chamber have a list of Hispanic Latino restaurants around the region. The Voice of Black Cincinnati has a list of vendors, not just food based, but across the board. So, I think that's another way that we can be intentional about how we spend our money, but also be vocal about how we spend and where we spend our money, so that we can lift up these businesses and also to celebrate community members with also maintaining their safety and integrity as well.
And I think what Women's City Club can do, we do have to call this to a halt. We are past our cutoff time, and we like to respect people's time, especially our speakers. To everybody here tonight, you have heard from three very passionate, committed, powerful people who understand the system and can help to the level that that's possible to happen. So you can, I'm not going to overpromise how they want to engage with you, but you can certainly contact Catholic Charities and Megan's office and Brian's Cincinnati Compass to share your concerns and get information from them. We definitely should be writing to our congressional representatives, Greg Landsman, and all the other ones who I don't know because Greg is my guy. Our state level people, if they hear enough from us, maybe we can make a dent in some of their thoughts. But and to do what we can do as individuals, giving time, giving money, and helping as we can. What Women's City Club can and will do, this program was recorded and it will be posted on our website. If you want to go back and listen to something, to rehear what the person said, to get the information again, or even better, to tell your friends to go on the website and listen to this program if they missed it tonight. We do want the word to go forward. So that is a good way to connect for all of us, the 31 people who are still here and the 15 or 20 who already have left us. We can be messengers also. So that's what Women's City Club will be doing. We are our what is our website? Womencityclub.org. Is that correct, Jeff and Beth? What is it? Put it, somebody stick it in chat. Beth or Jeff or somebody or Alice, put it in chat. So, and we'll share that with you too. I just want to thank our three speakers for their time. I know they're all overwhelmed, and yet they still immediately said, yes, sure, we're going to be there. We're very grateful to you. We are very grateful to all of you who came. I just want to do a real quick promo for Women's City Club that we do programs on a monthly basis, and you can look at our website and see what's going on, or you can contact us and we'll add you to our weekly update. We also have a big thing coming up in April at Memorial Hall. We're doing our National Speaker Forum with Kathy O'Neill, who is an author and a data scientist. She's not talking about immigration per se, but she's talking about all the ways that big data impacts your life. So that's a cool thing to know about. You can go to the Women's City Club website and get more information about that, or you can go to the Memorial Hall website and buy some tickets for Friday, April the 11th. And join us. Women's City Club membership is open to men and women. We have a sliding scale. There is a recommended dues fee, but we also have a pay whatever you can policy. We seek and welcome new members, and we do send out a lot of good information. We interface with a lot of other civic organizations, and we collectively share what they are doing. So if you join Women's City Club, it gives you entree to connect with a lot of other people. And it's a wonderful group of individuals that we all seem to be working together to try to correct some of the injustices and do what we can to make our community the safe and just place we want it to be for everybody. So those are my thoughts tonight. I think it's 8:38 and we should let you all go home, but please, thank you again, Tony and Megan and Brian. You are awesome. We may do a third version of this as the situation continues to develop, and we hope you'll come back. But let's all give them a big hand. I know you can't always see and hear us, but we appreciate you. And we are grateful to have you three warriors out there doing good things for the cause of justice. And on that night, thank you.
Thank you.